My name is Mia, and I just turned 32 last month. For the past decade, I have poured every ounce of my being into climbing the corporate ladder at Horizon Marketing. Last week, it finally paid off when I was promoted to Senior Executive Director. You would think my family would be proud, especially my father. But some parents have favorites, and in my family, that favorite has always been my younger brother, Jake. I spent my whole life trying to earn the approval that came so easily to him. What I never expected was that my big moment would become the turning point in our family dynamic. Before I tell you what happened at that party that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, you will want to hear what comes next. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Boston, where the earliest memories I have already showed signs of my father's clear preference for my brother. Jake is 3 years younger than me, and from the day my parents brought him home from the hospital, it was like I became background noise in my own home. My mother, Linda, tried her best to balance the attention. She would slip into my room after particularly difficult days with quiet words of encouragement and extra hugs, but she never directly confronted my father about his behavior. I think she was afraid of making things worse, but her silence only normalized the inequality. "Your brother needs more attention," my father would say whenever I questioned why Jake got new baseball equipment while I had to save my allowance for months to buy books. "He's a boy. He has different needs." I remember my 10th birthday party clearly. My father had promised to be there, but he called last minute saying he had to work late. I pretended not to care as my friends and I ate cake without him. The very next weekend, he took a full day off to attend Jake's Little League game, cheering so loudly from the stands that his voice was hoarse the next day. For Jake's 10th birthday, just 3 years later, my father rented out an entire mini golf course and invited not just Jake's friends, but also business associates to show off what a fine young man his son was becoming. I stood in the background helping my mother serve cake, feeling like a guest at my own family's event. The pattern continued through middle school. I would bring home straight A's, and my father would nod distractedly while flipping through channels. "That's what girls do. They're good at school stuff," he'd say, as if my academic achievements were merely a gender trait, rather than the result of countless late nights studying. Meanwhile, Jake's B- report card earned him a celebratory dinner because he'd shown improvement in math. When he joined the debate team in 8th grade, my father attended every competition. He had never once shown up for my science fairs, where I repeatedly won first-place trophies that collected dust in the basement because they cluttered up the living room. Christmas mornings told the same story. Jake would unwrap the latest gaming console, expensive sneakers, or sports equipment. I would receive practical items like socks, study planners, or gift cards with significantly lower values. Once, when I was 15, I unwrapped a college preparation book while Jake got his first smartphone. The message was clear: Jake deserved treats while I needed to focus on my future. By high school, I had internalized the message that nothing I did would ever be enough. So I became a perfectionist, throwing myself into academics and extracurriculars with an intensity that worried even my teachers. I wasn't just on the debate team, I became team captain. I didn't just join student government, I became class president. I didn't just take advanced placement classes, I took every single one available and graduated as valedictorian. None of it made a difference to my father. He attended my graduation ceremony but spent most of it on his phone. During my valedictorian speech, I spotted him checking his watch repeatedly. At the family celebration afterward, he spent most of his time telling relatives about Jake's plans to try out for varsity football the following year. My relationship with Jake was complicated. We weren't enemies, but we weren't close either. A wall of unspoken resentment and privilege stood between us. Jake wasn't malicious about being the favorite. He simply accepted the extra attention and opportunities as normal. How could I blame him? He'd never known anything different. "Dad's just old-fashioned," Jake would say when I occasionally let my frustration show. "He doesn't get all your academic stuff. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you." But love without respect or recognition doesn't feel much like love at all. When it came time for college, I received scholarships to several prestigious universities, including an Ivy League offer. My father's response was to question whether such elite environments would make me too full of myself. He suggested the state college where he'd gone would be more practical. I chose Northwestern University with its top-ranked marketing program directly against my father's advice to pursue accounting like he had. The night before I left for college, he sat me down for a talk I'll never forget. "Marketing is just fluff, Mia," he said, leaning back in his recliner, not quite making eye contact. "It's not a serious career for someone who needs to support themselves, not like accounting or business management. Those are real professions." I remember standing up, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. "Then I'll just have to be extraordinarily successful at fluff," I replied. He laughed, that dismissive chuckle that always made me feel 2 inches tall. "Good luck with that." That moment crystallized my determination. I wasn't just going to succeed, I was going to excel so brilliantly that even my father couldn't diminish my achievements. I would make him eat those words even if it took everything I had. What I didn't realize then was how that determination would shape the next decade of my life, pushing me to sacrifice nearly everything in pursuit of the validation I'd never received as a child. Success became my only goal, the only language I thought my father might finally understand. But as I would eventually learn, some people choose not to understand even the clearest of messages. College was where I first discovered my natural talent for marketing. While most of my classmates treated the introductory courses as interesting but theoretical, I saw the practical applications immediately. Where they saw assignments, I saw portfolio opportunities. When they complained about group projects, I was already networking with the most talented students, building connections I knew would serve me later. I lived on coffee and determination, taking 18 credit hours each semester while working part-time at the university's marketing department. I rarely joined the typical college social activities, viewing them as distractions from my goal. My roommates would return from parties to find me still awake, creating mock campaigns or analyzing market trends for fun. "You need to lighten up," my roommate Tanya would say, concerned by my intensity. "College is supposed to be about discovering yourself, not working yourself to death." But I already knew who I was, the girl who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. The daughter who was never quite good enough. And I was determined to change that narrative. I graduated summa cum laude with multiple job offers already lined up. My father attended the ceremony, but spent most of the dinner afterward telling relatives about Jake's internship at a local accounting firm, which he had personally arranged through an old college friend. My own accomplishments were mentioned as an aside, like an interesting coincidence, rather than the result of 4 years of relentless work. My first job was at a small marketing agency in Chicago, where the pay was low, but the opportunity to get my hands dirty was substantial. I took on every project offered, staying late and coming in on weekends. When colleagues invited me for happy hour, I would decline, using the extra hours to refine campaigns or learn new skills. Within a year, I had helped the agency land 2 major clients, bringing in revenue that caught the attention of larger firms. I leveraged this success to secure a position at Bradford & Reed, a mid-sized agency in New York, with bigger clients and better resources. Moving to New York meant leaving behind the few friends I'd made in Chicago. It also meant being further from family, though in some ways that was a relief. Our weekly phone calls had become exercises in restraint as I listened to my mother gush about Jake's latest accomplishment, or my father's barely disguised disinterest in my career progress. "Marketing, right? How's that going?" he would ask, never remembering the names of my clients or the campaigns I worked on. Then, without waiting for a real answer, he would launch into detailed updates about Jake's job at the accounting firm, where he was really making connections with the partners and showing real promise. In New York, I threw myself even more completely into my work. I took on the clients no one else wanted, the challenging accounts with impossible deadlines or difficult stakeholders. I developed a reputation as the person who could turn around failing campaigns and salvage problematic client relationships. My personal life, however, was practically non-existent. I went on occasional first dates that rarely led to seconds, because I couldn't or wouldn't make time for relationships. My apartment was minimally furnished because I was rarely there except to sleep. My diet consisted largely of delivery food eaten at my desk. My social circle narrowed to colleagues who understood the demands of the industry. Meanwhile, Jake had settled into a comfortable position at the accounting firm where he was doing adequately, but not exceptionally. Yet my father spoke of him as though he were on track to become CEO. Jake bought a house in the suburbs with his girlfriend Amanda, a milestone my father celebrated by helping them with the down payment of financial assistance he never offered to me despite my significantly higher cost of living in New York. "Your brother is establishing himself," my father explained when I questioned the disparity. "He's setting up a proper family life. Your career hopping in expensive cities is your choice." I had been at Bradford and Reed for 2 years when I met Sarah Chen, the new creative director, who had been brought in to revitalize the agency's approach. Sarah was in her 50s with a stellar industry reputation and a no-nonsense management style that intimidated most of the staff. For some reason, she took an interest in me. Perhaps she recognized the same driven quality that had propelled her own career, or maybe she simply appreciated my work ethic. Whatever the reason, she became the mentor I desperately needed, but never knew to seek. "You have natural talent," she told me after I presented a particularly successful campaign strategy. "But you're going to burn out if you keep this pace. Success isn't just about working harder than everyone else." Sarah began inviting me to client meetings I would normally not have access to. She pushed back when I tried to take on too many projects simultaneously. Most importantly, she gave me the constructive criticism and genuine praise that I'd been starved for my entire life. With Sarah's guidance, I began to work smarter rather than just harder. I learned to delegate to choose projects that showcased my strengths and to present my ideas with confidence rather than desperate perfectionism. My campaigns started winning industry awards. My salary increased substantially. I was headhunted by Horizon Marketing, one of the top firms in the country, for a position that would put me on a direct path to executive leadership. When I called my parents to share the news about joining Horizon, my mother was genuinely happy for me. My father's response was, "Well, I hope this one sticks. All this job hopping doesn't look good on a resume, you know." This despite the fact that each move I'd made had been a significant step up in responsibility and compensation. That same month, Jake received a modest promotion at the firm where he'd been for 5 years. My father took the entire family out to celebrate at the most expensive restaurant in town and presented Jake with an engraved watch. My mother sent me photos of the event with apologetic texts about how they wished I could have been there. At Horizon, I finally found my professional home. The company culture valued innovation and results over politics and face time. For the first time, I felt recognized for my actual contributions, rather than just my willingness to sacrifice personal time. Under these conditions, I flourished even more, leading campaigns that significantly increased both revenue and industry recognition. 4 years of exceptional performance led to my promotion to Senior Executive Director, making me one of the youngest executives in the company's history. The CEO himself, Marcus Williams, announced the promotion in a company-wide meeting, citing my transformative impact on key accounts and my leadership in bringing in 7 new major clients in the past year alone. After years of working to prove my worth, this felt like vindication. The rational part of me knew that my father's approval shouldn't matter anymore, that I had objectively succeeded beyond what most people achieve in twice the time. But the wounded child inside me still hoped that this milestone, this undeniable evidence of my professional value, would finally make him see me. So, despite my better judgment, I decided to invite my family to the official promotion celebration that Horizon was hosting at the Garfield, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. I told myself it was because I wanted to share my success with them, but deep down, I knew I was still seeking the validation I'd been chasing since childhood. What I didn't realize was that this event would become the catalyst for a long overdue confrontation and ultimately liberation from the approval I'd been seeking for as long as I could remember. The week leading up to my promotion party was a strange mixture of professional pride and personal anxiety. During the day, I was confident Executive Director Mia accepting congratulations from colleagues and diving into the expanded responsibilities of my new role. But each evening, as I considered the upcoming celebration with my family present, I reverted to the insecure daughter still desperate for her father's approval. I spent an absurd amount of time planning every detail of the event, as though perfect execution could somehow guarantee my father's recognition. I personally called the restaurant 3 times to confirm the menu selections chosen specifically to appeal to my father's traditional tastes, despite the chef's more innovative recommendations. I arranged for the best table with a view of the Manhattan skyline because my father had once mentioned liking city views. "You're overthinking this," Sarah told me when she caught me rearranging the seating chart for the 4th time. "Your promotion is a testament to your abilities. If your father can't see that it's his loss, not yours." I nodded as if I agreed, but we both knew I didn't believe it. Not really. My mother called every day that week, her enthusiasm both genuine and tinged with worry. She knew the family dynamics better than anyone and seemed to sense my underlying tension. "Your father is very proud, Mia," she assured me, though we both knew she had no evidence to support this claim. "He's just not good at showing it." Jake was the most straightforward in his support. "Congrats, sis," he texted along with champagne emojis. "Can't wait to see your fancy New York life. Dad's being weird about the trip, but Mom and I are handling him." The fact that my brother needed to handle my father regarding a celebration of my achievement said everything about our family dynamic. My father's only direct communication was a terse email asking about appropriate attire and whether the restaurant served normal food or just that fancy stuff nobody actually wants to eat. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of the significance of the promotion, just practical questions laced with subtle criticism. The night before the party, I stood in front of my closet for nearly an hour deliberating over my outfit. I had recently purchased a tailored burgundy suit that projected exactly the confident, powerful image I wanted to convey professionally. But a small, insistent voice in my head wondered if my father would find it too showy or inappropriate. I hated that voice, hated that even now, as a successful executive, I was still considering his potential disapproval in my choices. I finally chose the burgundy suit paired with minimal jewelry and classic pumps. It was a small act of defiance, a statement that I was dressing for myself and my accomplishment, not for his approval. But the fact that it felt like defiance at all was telling. That night, I barely slept, playing out various scenarios of how my father might react to seeing my professional world. Would he finally acknowledge my success? Would he find ways to diminish it? Would he spend the entire evening talking about Jake's more modest achievements, as he had at every family gathering for as long as I could remember? The morning of the party, I arrived at the restaurant 2 hours early to oversee the final preparations. The private dining room looked perfect with elegant floral arrangements and subtle Horizon marketing branding. The bar was stocked with my father's preferred scotch alongside the premium champagne the company had provided. Place cards were positioned precisely with my family seated at my table, along with Sarah and Marcus. As the time approached for guests to arrive, Sarah found me adjusting a flower arrangement that didn't need adjusting. "You've achieved something remarkable, Mia," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Tonight is about celebrating that. Try to enjoy it regardless of how your family responds." I nodded, grateful for her understanding without explanation. In many ways, Sarah had become more of a parental figure to me than my actual parents over the past few years. Colleagues began arriving, and I slipped easily into the role of gracious host, accepting congratulations and making introductions. For a brief period, I almost forgot my anxiety about my family's impending arrival. Then I saw them enter the room. My mother looking slightly overwhelmed but happy in her best dress, Jake grinning and taking in the upscale surroundings with appreciative whistles, and my father, his expression already set in the vaguely disapproving look I knew so well. "This is quite something," my father said by way of greeting, his tone making it unclear whether something was positive or negative. He glanced around at the elegant room, his gaze lingering on the open bar. "Must have cost a fortune." "The company is hosting Dad," I explained, leaning in for the cheek kiss I knew he expected. "It's a standard celebration for executive promotions." "Executive," he repeated as though testing the validity of the word. "Well, it's certainly flashier than the accounting world." And there it was, the first dismissal of the evening delivered within seconds of his arrival. I felt the familiar sinking in my stomach but pushed it aside to greet my mother and Jake. "Oh, honey, this is wonderful," my mother gushed, embracing me warmly. "You look so professional in that suit." Doesn't she look successful, Richard? My father made a non-committal noise and headed toward the bar. He's just tired from the trip, my mother whispered apologetically. You know how he gets about flying. Jake gave me a supportive hug. This place is incredible, sis. You're clearly killing it. He lowered his voice. Sorry about Dad. I talked him up the whole way here, but you know how he is. I appreciated Jake's attempt, but we both knew no amount of talking up would change our father's fundamental inability to value my achievements. As I introduced my family to my colleagues, I could see them through others' eyes for the first time. My mother was warm, but constantly deferring to my father. Jake was friendly and engaging. And my father was the odd note, his responses just slightly off his questions, borderline inappropriate. So what exactly does Mia do here? He asked Marcus, my CEO. I've never really understood what marketing people actually do all day. Marcus, to his credit, took the question seriously and explained my role in bringing in new clients and overseeing major campaigns. Your daughter is exceptional, he concluded. We're fortunate to have her on our executive team. My father nodded without commenting, then immediately changed the subject to ask about Marcus's golf handicap, a clear signal that he considered the topic of my career closed. The first half of the evening proceeded relatively smoothly. My father limited himself to occasional subtle digs rather than outright criticism. My mother attempted to smooth over awkward moments. Jake made genuine efforts to engage with my colleagues and learn about my work. Then came the formal part of the celebration. Marcus stood to make a toast praising my contributions to the company in specific glowing terms. Several colleagues followed with their own stories of my problem-solving abilities, creativity, and leadership. Mia took our Miller account from the brink of disaster to our most successful campaign of the year, said David from the creative team. She worked through an entire weekend to completely rebuild the strategy when the client rejected our initial approach. When I was struggling with the Westridge presentation, Mia stayed late to help me restructure it completely, added Alyssa, a junior account manager. She never takes credit for others' work, but she's always there to support the team. As the praise continued, I found myself both moved by my colleagues' words and acutely aware of my father's increasingly tense posture. He was smiling tightly, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Next to him, my mother was beaming, while Jake looked genuinely impressed. When the formal toasts concluded, people began mingling again. Jake pulled me aside, his expression animated. Mia, I had no idea you were such a rock star here, he said. You never talk about your work in this much detail when you come home. No one ever asks, I replied simply. His face fell slightly. That's fair. I probably haven't asked enough either. There was a moment of real connection between us and adult recognition of the family dynamics that had shaped both our lives in different ways. Then my mother approached with my father in tow. Everything is lovely, dear, she said. Your father and I were just saying how impressive all this is. I looked at my father, wondering if he had actually said anything of the sort. His expression suggested otherwise. Something in me, perhaps bolstered by the genuine recognition I'd received all evening, prompted me to ask directly, What do you think about all this, Dad, about my promotion? He seemed startled by the direct question, glancing around as if hoping for interruption. Finding none, he cleared his throat and said the words that would ultimately change everything between us. Well, to be honest, Mia, he said, his voice carrying more in the momentarily quiet space than I think he intended. I don't think you deserved this success, but your brother did. Jake has been working steadily at the same firm for years, learning the business properly. This whole marketing thing, it's all flash and no substance. Anyone can get ahead in a field like that. The room went silent. I saw Sarah's expression of shock, Marcus's carefully controlled professional mask slipping to reveal anger on my behalf. My mother gasped softly, her hand going to her throat. Jake looked mortified, stepping away from our father, as if to physically distance himself from the statement. I felt a curious sense of calm wash over me. After decades of subtle and not so subtle put-downs, this blatant dismissal of my entire career in front of my colleagues should have devastated me. Instead, it felt like confirmation of what I had always known, but tried to deny, No achievement of mine would ever be enough. No evidence of my worth would ever convince him. And in that moment of clarity, I realized I no longer needed his conviction. The anxious knot that had lived in my chest for as long as I could remember suddenly loosened. A smile spread across my face, genuine, rather than the strained expression I usually wore in his presence. I straightened to my full height, picked up my champagne glass, and looked my father directly in the eyes. "Cool," I said, my voice strong and clear. "Then he can pay your bills too." You could have heard a pin drop in that moment. My father's face cycled through confusion, shock, and then anger as the implication of my words registered. Few people in the room understood the full context, but everyone recognized the seismic shift that had just occurred. "What are you talking about?" My father sputtered, his face reddening. "I don't need your money." I maintained eye contact, years of suppressed truths fighting to emerge. "The monthly transfers to your account for the past 3 years suggest otherwise. The ones helping with your mortgage after you refinanced. The ones covering mom's medical bills when your insurance fell short." My mother looked down at her hands, clearly aware of this arrangement. Jake's expression showed he had no idea. "You've been paying their bills?" Jake asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" My father was already turning away, grabbing my mother's elbow. "We're leaving. I won't stand here and be embarrassed like this." "You did that all by yourself, Dad," I said quietly, but he was already heading for the door, practically dragging my mother, who threw an apologetic look over her shoulder. Jake stood frozen, clearly torn between family loyalty and the revelation of this deception. "Mia, I had no idea," he finally said. "Let me talk to them. I'll come back." He squeezed my arm before hurrying after our parents. As the door closed behind them, the room remained silent for a moment before Sarah stepped forward, glass raised. "To Mia Andrews," she said firmly, "whose exceptional talent is matched only by her resilience." The tension broke as my colleagues rallied around me, offering support through their presence, rather than invasive questions. Marcus skillfully guided the conversation back to professional topics, giving me space to compose myself. I moved through the rest of the evening in a strange state of emotional limbo, simultaneously devastated by the public confrontation and liberated by finally speaking my truth. Several hours later, as the party wound down, Sarah pulled me aside. "Are you all right?" she asked directly. "Not really," I admitted. "But I think I will be. For the first time, I actually think I will be." She nodded, understanding more than I'd ever explicitly told her. Family dynamics are complicated. But what he said tonight was about him, not you. Remember that. By the time I returned to my apartment, I was emotionally exhausted, but also experiencing an unfamiliar lightness. I kicked off my shoes and was about to pour myself a glass of wine when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see my entire family standing in the hallway. I seriously considered not answering, but realized that avoidance had been my strategy for too long. I opened the door without greeting them. "We need to talk," my father said, his tone suggesting he expected to control the conversation as he always had. "It's nearly midnight," I replied, but stepped aside to let them enter. My apartment was immaculate but sparsely decorated, revealing how little time I spent there. My mother immediately tried to diffuse the tension. "Mia, we're so sorry about what happened. Your father didn't mean what he said." "Yes, he did," I contradicted her gently. "He's been saying versions of it my entire life. This was just the first time he said it in front of people who actually value me." My father paced my living room, agitation in every movement. "You had no right to talk about our private financial arrangements in public. That was completely inappropriate. More inappropriate than telling me I don't deserve my success in front of my entire company," I countered, surprised by my own calmness. "More inappropriate than consistently dismissing my achievements while praising Jake's modest accomplishments my entire life." "That's not fair," he started, but Jake interrupted. "Actually, Dad, I think it is fair." My brother looked uncomfortable but determined. "I've always known you favored me, but I never knew about the financial help Mia's been giving you. Why would you take money from her while telling me how financially responsible you are while helping me with my down payment?" My father looked betrayed by Jake's questions. That's completely different. The help we gave you was about setting up your future, your family. Mia chose this expensive lifestyle. My expensive lifestyle has allowed me to help support you and Mom for years, I said. The money I send isn't for luxuries. It's for your basic expenses that your own salary doesn't cover. My mother wrung her hands. Your father's firm has had difficulties in recent years. The economy, you know. We didn't want to worry you children. So instead, you worried Mia by asking her for money while simultaneously criticizing her career choices, Jake asked incredulously. How does that make sense? My father's face hardened. I never asked for her help. She offered. And now she's throwing it in our faces to embarrass me. That was when something finally snapped inside me. Decades of seeking approval, of swallowing criticism, of making excuses for his behavior, all crystallized into perfect clarity. I'm not trying to embarrass you, Dad. I'm trying to understand why nothing I do is ever good enough. Why Jake could get a C in math and receive praise while I could win national awards and barely get acknowledged. Why my entire career is dismissed as flash despite clear evidence of its value. Why you would take my money while continuing to belittle how I earn it. My voice remained steady, but tears were streaming down my face now. Not tears of hurt, as had been so common in my childhood, but tears of release. I have spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. I've sacrificed relationships, health, and happiness working to prove my worth to you. And tonight I finally realized that nothing will ever be enough because the problem isn't my achievements. It's your inability to see my value. My father stood speechless, his usual quick dismissals failing him in the face of such direct confrontation. My mother was openly crying. Jake looked between us, decades of family dynamics suddenly visible in a new light. I continued, my voice stronger now, that we need to establish some new boundaries. I'm going to stop the monthly transfers. I'm going to step back from trying to earn approval that's never coming. I'll always be your daughter, but I can't keep playing a game that's rigged against me. So you're abandoning your family responsibilities because of one comment, my father finally said, defaulting to his usual tactic of making me the villain. Jake stepped forward before I could respond. She's setting healthy boundaries after a lifetime of unfair treatment. There's a difference. He turned to me. I had no idea, Mia, about any of this. I always thought it was just Dad being old-fashioned about gender roles or something. I never saw the full picture. My father looked at my brother as though he'd been betrayed. You're taking her side. This isn't about sides, Jake replied. This is about recognizing patterns that have hurt Mia for years. Patterns I benefited from without fully understanding. My father grabbed his coat. I won't stand here and be lectured in my daughter's overpriced apartment that my hard work helped pay for. Your hard work didn't pay for this apartment, Dad, I said quietly. Mine did, despite your constant assurances that I would fail. He stormed out without another word. My mother hesitated, torn as always between her husband and her children. I'm sorry, Mia, she whispered. He does love you. He just doesn't know how to show it. Love without respect isn't enough anymore, Mom, I replied gently. It hasn't been for a long time. After my parents left, Jake stayed behind. We talked until the early morning hours, really talked for perhaps the first time as adults. He apologized for his obliviousness to the family dynamics that had benefited him at my expense. I assured him that I didn't blame him for our father's behavior. I'll talk to them, he promised as he left. Make them understand. I appreciated his intention but knew that understanding would require my father to acknowledge patterns too deeply ingrained to easily recognize. Still, as I finally collapsed into bed as dawn was breaking, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not hope that my father would suddenly change, but hope that I finally could. Returning to work after the promotion party confrontation was strangely anticlimactic. I had worried that colleagues might treat me differently after witnessing my family drama, but found instead a network of subtle support. No one mentioned the incident directly, but there were small gestures, coffee silently placed on my desk during long meetings, check-ins that went slightly beyond professional courtesy, and a general protective energy that both surprised and touched me. Sarah was the only one who referenced it explicitly. "Family systems are powerful," she said during our weekly one-on-one meeting. "They program us with expectations and patterns that can take a lifetime to unlearn. What you did took courage." Her words gave me permission to see my confrontation with my father as an act of strength rather than disrespect. For someone who had been raised to value family harmony above personal truth, this reframing was revolutionary. 2 days after the party, I canceled the standing monthly transfer to my parents' account. My finger hovered over the confirmation button for several minutes as lifelong guilt battled with my new resolution. In the end, I not only canceled the transfer, but also scheduled a call with a therapist Sarah had recommended. Both actions felt like declarations of independence. Jake called me that weekend, his voice a mixture of concern and revelation. "I talked with Mom," he said. "She told me you've been helping them financially since Dad's firm downsized 3 years ago. Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. Dad framed it as me giving back after all they'd done for me. You know how he twists things. "I could have helped too," Jake said, a note of frustration in his voice. "Instead, I've been taking their help with my house, believing Dad when he said everything was fine financially." This was new territory for us, this honest assessment of our family's dysfunction. For the first time, I felt Jake seeing our father clearly, without the golden child filter that had colored his perspective for decades. "What will they do without your help?" he asked. "Dad will need to either cut back on expenses or take on more clients," I replied. "They're not destitute, Jake. They just can't maintain their lifestyle on their income. That's not my responsibility to fix." My brother was quiet for a moment. "I'll help them if they need it," he finally said. "But I'm not going to let Dad pretend it's all fine while taking my money and criticizing you anymore. That stops now." His solidarity was unexpected and deeply moving. For the first time, I felt like I had an ally in navigating our complicated family rather than a competitor for our father's approval. At work, I found myself approaching my role differently. Without the desperate need to prove my worth driving my every decision, I could evaluate projects more objectively. I began delegating more effectively, trusting my team rather than feeling I needed to oversee every detail personally. I started leaving the office by 6 most evenings, reclaiming personal time I had previously sacrificed to the altar of achievement. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "You're more effective as a leader now," she observed. "Less frantic energy, more strategic thinking." She was right. Without the exhausting need to constantly prove myself, I had mental and emotional space for innovation and genuine leadership. My team responded positively to this shift, bringing more creative ideas forward as they sensed my newfound openness to collaboration. One particularly significant evening, I left work at 5:30, something that would have been unthinkable months earlier, and attended a pottery class I'd been curious about for years. The feeling of clay between my fingers, of creating something purely for joy rather than evaluation, was almost foreign. I left with a lopsided bowl and a strange sense of liberation. Hobbies, my therapist Dr. Rivera noted when I mentioned this, are revolutionary acts for people who have built their identity around productivity and external validation. We had been working together for 6 weeks by then, excavating the deeply rooted beliefs that had driven my perfectionism and workaholism. Each session revealed more clearly how my father's conditional regard had shaped my relationship with achievement, success, and self-worth. "You learned early that love was something to be earned through accomplishment," Dr. Rivera explained. "It's a common pattern in families with narcissistic parents. The child becomes a reflection of the parent's ego rather than a person in their own right." Labeling my father's behavior as narcissistic felt simultaneously illuminating and disloyal. I had spent so many years making excuses for him, blaming myself for not being worthy of his approval. Recognizing the dysfunction as his issue rather than mine was both liberating and painful. 8 weeks after the promotion party, my mother called to invite me to Thanksgiving. "Your father has calmed down," she assured me, her voice hopeful. "He misses you." "Has he acknowledged anything about his behavior?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Her silence was confirmation enough. "He's your father, Mia. Family is family." I need to think about it, I replied, a response that would have been unthinkable before. The old Mia would have immediately agreed, desperate for another chance to earn approval. When I discussed the invitation with Dr. Rivera, she asked a simple but profound question. What would make attending this gathering healthy for you? I considered this carefully. Boundaries, clear expectations, not falling back into old patterns of seeking validation. And can you maintain those boundaries in their home in that familiar dynamic? The question gave me pause. I don't know, but I think I need to try. I called my mother back and accepted the invitation with conditions I would come for the day, but not stay overnight. I would leave if my father became disparaging. I would not discuss my financial support or lack thereof. Thanksgiving was tense but manageable. My father was coolly polite, clearly under instructions from both my mother and Jake to behave. He asked surface-level questions about my job, but changed the subject whenever my responses indicated success. I observed this pattern with newfound clarity, no longer internalizing it as personal failure, but recognizing it as his limitation. Jake pulled me aside after dinner. "He's making an effort," he said. "In his way." "This isn't effort," I corrected gently. "This is damage control. He's still not interested in my life or success. He's just learned that being openly dismissive has consequences." My brother couldn't argue with this assessment. "I've been thinking a lot about how different our experiences in this family have been," he admitted. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." His acknowledgement meant more than he could know. For so long I had felt gaslit by the disparities in our treatment that everyone pretended not to notice. Having Jake finally see it validated decades of confusion and hurt. As winter turned to spring, I continued building a more balanced life. I started dating someone, Daniel, who valued my ambition without defining me by it. I explored interests outside of work, discovering a passion for photography and early morning runs along the Hudson River. I established a routine of weekly calls with Jake that deepened our adult relationship beyond the constraints of our childhood roles. Communication with my parents settled into a new pattern. I spoke with my mother regularly, but kept conversations superficial. My father and I maintained a careful distance, interacting primarily at family gatherings that became less frequent as I prioritized my own well-being over familial obligation. In April, nearly 6 months after the promotion party confrontation, Jake called with an unexpected development. "Dad wants to meet with you," he said. "Just the two of you. He asked me to arrange it." My immediate reaction was suspicion. Why can't he call me himself? And why now? "He's been different lately," Jake said cautiously. "More reflective. I think seeing me establish boundaries too has been a wake-up call. He's realizing he might lose relationships with both his children if he doesn't change." I agreed to meet my father at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between his suburban home and my city apartment. I arrived early, steeling myself for disappointment, while trying to remain open to whatever might unfold. He arrived precisely on time, looking older than I remembered. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for several minutes before he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about what happened at your promotion thing," he began, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. "Jake says I've been unfair to you, that I've held you to different standards than him." It wasn't an apology, but from my father this level of self-reflection was unprecedented. "You have," I confirmed, neither accusatory nor emotional. "My whole life." He fidgeted with his napkin, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't see it that way. I've always wanted what's best for both of you. But Jake says I've been harder on you, expected more." "It's not just about expectations, Dad. It's about recognition, support, basic interest in my life and accomplishments. You've never shown any of that for me the way you have for Jake." He looked up, a flash of the old defensiveness crossing his face before he visibly tamped it down. "Your mother and I are grateful for the financial help you provided. I should have said that before." Again, not an apology, but an acknowledgement. From my father, it was something. "Why did you tell me I didn't deserve my success?" I asked directly. "At my promotion party in front of all my colleagues. Why would you say that?" He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I just meant that Jake has worked hard too in a more traditional field. He hasn't gotten the same recognition. So you thought the solution was to diminish my achievement, rather than simply being proud of both your children for different things. I kept my voice even genuinely curious about his reasoning. My father had no good answer for this. We talked for nearly 2 hours, circling around the fundamental issues, without him ever taking full responsibility for the pain he had caused. There was no tearful reconciliation, no dramatic breakthrough. But there was perhaps a small crack in the wall of his perception, a glimmer of recognition that his behavior had consequences. As we prepared to leave, he said gruffly, "I am proud of you, in my way. All this marketing stuff isn't what I understand, but you seem to be doing well at it." It was perhaps the closest thing to approval he could offer. Months earlier, I would have clung to these crumbs, desperately grateful for any acknowledgement. Now I recognized both the effort it represented for him and its fundamental inadequacy. "Thank you," I replied simply. "That means something. But I need you to know that I'm no longer defining my worth by your recognition. I value your approval, Dad, but I no longer require it." His expression suggested he didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. As we parted ways, I realized that I truly meant what I had said. The desperate need for his validation that had driven me for decades had been replaced by something more sustainable self-acceptance and the recognition of my own inherent worth. 6 months after my promotion party became the unexpected catalyst for transformation. I found myself in a place I wouldn't have recognized a year earlier. My life had expanded beyond the narrow pursuit of professional validation into something richer and more balanced. I still excelled at my job, perhaps even more effectively than before, but it no longer consumed every waking moment. I had developed genuine friendships outside of work, pursued interests that had nothing to do with achievement, and even adopted a cat named Fitzgerald, who couldn't care less about my professional accomplishments, but showed great interest in my morning rituals. My relationship with Daniel had deepened into something meaningful. He was the first person I had dated who seemed genuinely unimpressed by my career success, but deeply interested in my thoughts, dreams, and the person I was becoming outside of my professional identity. "What I love about you isn't what you achieve," he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together, something the old workaholic Mia would never have made time for. "It's how your mind works, your resilience, your growing ability to put yourself first without apologizing for it." My sessions with Dr. Rivera had decreased from weekly to bi-monthly, focusing now on maintaining healthy boundaries, rather than excavating old wounds. "You've done remarkable work," she observed during a recent appointment. "Many people never recognize the patterns that limit them, let alone find the courage to change them." The most profound changes, however, were in my family relationships. Jake and I had developed a genuine adult-sibling bond, one based on mutual respect and understanding, rather than the competitive dynamic our father had fostered. We spoke regularly, sharing the challenges of family events and supporting each other through the ongoing navigation of our parents' expectations. "You know what's weird?" Jake said during one of our calls. "I think I was as trapped by being the favorite as you were by being overlooked. I never felt I could question anything or make choices Dad wouldn't approve of." This insight had never occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. Jake had received our father's approval, but with conditions that limited his autonomy in ways I hadn't recognized. My freedom from expectation, painful as it had been, had allowed me to forge my own path without fear of losing validation I'd never had. My relationship with my father remained complicated. Our cafe meeting hadn't magically transformed decades of patterned interaction, but it had established a new baseline of cautious mutual respect. He made visible efforts to show interest in my career, asking occasionally specific questions about projects I'd mentioned. These questions were often awkward or slightly off-target, but the attempt itself represented significant change. My mother had slowly begun to advocate more directly for herself and for equitable treatment of her children. Small comments like, "Richard Mia was talking about her new campaign," when he interrupted or changed the subject, suggested a subtle shift in her willingness to challenge his behavior. When Horizon Marketing scheduled a company celebration for the successful completion of our largest campaign to date, I found myself considering whether to invite my family. The old Mia would have extended the invitation while simultaneously dreading their attendance. The new Mia approached the decision with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. "I'd like to invite you to my company event next month," I said to my father directly during a family dinner. "But only if you can attend as a supportive parent. I don't need false enthusiasm, just basic respect for my professional accomplishments." He looked startled by this directness, but nodded slowly. "I think I can manage that." The night of the celebration, I felt none of the anxiety that had preceded my promotion party. I had prepared myself for whatever might unfold, secure in the knowledge that my worth wasn't contingent on my father's assessment. My family arrived together, my mother beaming with genuine pride, Jake offering a supportive thumbs up, and my father making visible efforts to engage positively with my colleagues. When asked about his daughter, he responded with a brief but uncharacteristically direct acknowledgement. "She's always been determined. Once she sets her mind to something, there's no stopping her." From anyone else, this would have been faint praise. From my father, it was a significant concession. I accepted it for what it was while no longer needing it to be more. Later that evening, as colleagues and family mingled, Sarah approached with a knowing smile. "Your father just told me he's proud of what you've accomplished here." Direct quote. I smiled, appreciating the information, but no longer desperate for it. "That's good to hear." "You're different now," Sarah observed. "Lighter somehow." She was right. The weight of seeking approval I would never fully receive had been replaced by the much more sustainable practice of approving of myself. The shift wasn't always easy or linear, but it was real and increasingly stable. As I looked around at the gathering, I saw the fullness of my life with new clarity. My professional success was just one dimension of who I was becoming. My worth wasn't determined by my father's ability to recognize it, nor by any external validation. It existed independently, inherently, requiring no one's confirmation to be real. I realized that spending a lifetime trying to earn love that should be freely given is a losing game. True success isn't measured by promotions or paychecks, but by having the courage to accept yourself even when others won't. The moment I stopped needing my father's approval was the moment I truly became free. And sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. Have you ever found yourself seeking validation from someone who couldn't or wouldn't give it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about breaking free from unhealthy patterns. Remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. Thank you for listening, and remember that your journey to self-acceptance is the most important work you'll ever do.